Hi, so this is Emmanuelle with Vegan Fashion Week, and I'm really happy to be here today to introduce you to amazing advocates, people that really manage to, use their values and inspire people in their media. Vegan Fashion Week is a platform for fashion activism. We're trying to lead positive change through fashion because we believe that fashion is activism. And in this platform, I'm really trying to inspire creatives to, inspire their audience with positive leadership. Um, all life is interconnected, and we know today that animal exploitation is the leading cause of what we're experiencing today. Um, we have to try to rethink the way we consume, the way we interact with other people on this earth, other species, and that's why I gathered this community today that is really a reflection of all these different ideals. And I would like to introduce you to Maggie Baird, which is a mom of Billie, Eilish, and that is also herself an actress and an accomplished advocate. We launched recently a concept that is called Support and Feed, which is an organization that is trying to support people during these difficult times, vegan restaurants, vegan businesses, to feed. No. Oh, sorry. Okay. So Maggie.
I have a bit of a delay.
Hey Maggie.
Would you like me to explain what we're doing?
Yes, please.
Well, we created an organization called Support and Feed, and the basic premise is that we want to promote plant-based eating to help save the planet and for every other reason which it's so important. And during this crisis time, we were really worried about so many people being hungry and so many businesses going under. So we created a platform where you can come to our site, make a donation, and we will get food. Our restaurants here in Los Angeles, now New York and Philadelphia, and then we'll take that food to people in need. We do frontline workers. We also do lots of homeless shelters and women's shelters and children's shelters. Any program that is suffering and in need of food, we take the food. It's all incredible. It's all made by some of the best restaurants in the cities and the most wonderful plant-based places. So we're hoping to keep these restaurants open long term and feed people this healthy food and promote vegan eating while we're at it.
Thank you so much, Maggie, for what you do. We also have Kate and Thomas that are connecting with us today. So I would like to hear from you too, because you're the most amazing couple that I know. You have been an amazing activist for many years, Kate, and you have been, working very hard to help the LGBT communities and, trying to really push feminism in the music industry. And you also have been a strong supporter of Vegan Fashion Week, which I will be forever grateful. And maybe you can explain also why you took this step towards Vegan Fashion Week. I also want to introduce Thomas, which is the winner of the Vegan Hairstylist Icon. We delivered this October for Vegan Fashion Week because we try to really celebrate vegan creatives and people that are aligning their values with their work. And Thomas is really the representation of this movement of people that are really working for the better world. So, if you can explain.
Okay. I guess I thank you for the introduction. I think when I first started doing music, I did my first show on April 2006, and then less than a year I had a #1 record and was kind of touring the world, and I was 17 or 18 at the time, and I think it just blew my mind a little thing. I felt this sort of like pressure to be responsible for something. I think I became really aware of how lucky I was to have a platform. And I remember I'd gone from doing shows that were about like 200 capacity to suddenly being in these like big venues. And I lost my voice a little bit. I'd felt really confident, like chatting to an audience. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, I don't know how to do this anymore because there's too many people in the room and I don't really know how to connect with them. I feel like I should more than ever because there's so many people there. And that was really like, the first thing I did was, I made a zine that I could just throw out at the end of the show. So then I was like, I don't really have to say anything. And like, people really want the zine. So we can like, I can get people I think are really cool with good opinions to write stuff and just throw it out. And then I've sort of done something. And then eventually I kind of found my footing and confidence to just be really, open about how I felt, I think. And yeah, there's so many vulnerable people like at my shows, I think, and seeing them right in front of you is really overwhelming because you're like, oh my God, there's all these people kind of looking at me, and the music is some kind of support, and so I feel a responsibility to like do something with that. And yeah, I've always been a big animal lover. Like I grew up just with dogs and pets and loving animals, and never really. I did have a thing when I was really young. I remember asking my mum what ham was made of, and she said pigs, and I just started crying, and I was like, oh my God, you've been letting me eat pigs. What, like how? And then I sort of tried vegetarianism, and it didn't really work when I was really young because I just didn't eat very healthily and I didn't like vegetables. And then I had a whole like OCD episode basically when I was 22, where my OCD just took over my life and I couldn't leave the house without completing all these tasks and doing all these weird rules. And my road to veganism was a bit of a mental health journey because one of the rules became this exchange where I had a bunny rabbit. I still have a bunny rabbit. She's actually 11 years old now. But I got really paranoid about her not being okay. And my OCD was like, I didn't really realize at the time, but kind of the main cause of that. And I had to do all these things so that she would be okay. And then overnight, I had this weird transition. I made this deal with the universe where if I didn't eat any animals, then she would be okay. And it was like this fair exchange of like, I'll respect animals and my animal will be okay. It was obviously this weird like mental health issue. But once it sort of surpassed, I stopped. Like it's always helped me control my OCD. Actually, I can always lean on it to be like, it's okay. I don't have to do the other crazy rules because I still don't eat any animals. But it completely changed my life for the better. And the longer I was vegetarian, the harder it was to ignore like the other issues within my diet and choices. And I think it was about 8 years in, and then I watched Okja, the movie on Netflix, and there was just the scene at the end where there's all those pigs who you've completely fallen in love with, the relationship with this young girl and her super pig, like they're connected to. And I'm like lying on the sofa sobbing, and my dog right next to me, like looking at me. I was just like, I can't really, ethical thing that me coming into the in any way. I can't make choices that are ethical all the time. This overwhelming feeling of like, I think there was like voices in my head telling me, oh, you're going to eat eggs, you're going to eat cheese, you're going to do this, you're going to buy leather. And I sort of pushed them away for a while. And then all of a sudden, like, became really clear with the message in that movie that like, no, I don't want to be part of this in any way. And then I think, then it's about the confidence to spread that message and feel okay and positive about it. And it's like being vegan has made me so happy because it's like the kindest way to live. And it's a bit of a journey then thinking about every little detail. And it was, me and Tom started dating a few years ago, and he was also vegan. And it was Tom that kind of made me think about the wider picture when it came to fashion, and because he was like changing his hair kit and like belt and like just things he's had. He's like, I still have this and this is leather. And I was like, oh man, I didn't even think about that really. So it becomes a huge lifestyle change.
Exactly.
And I think the longer you do it and the more you do it, it's more fulfilling, and you kind of want to expand it as much as you can, because it's like, I think especially in a time like this where a lot of us feel really helpless, to be able to make any kind of difference and support the world in some way, it's like, it feels good, you know what I mean? And I think this is a huge way that people can participate, really by just changing their own personal life, and it can be quite easy. So
exactly, it's a very long process, and it's good to take little steps and do, things at your own rhythm, and try to really incorporate more and more and more, compassion, when you start to see the big picture and understand that you can really apply this philosophy, which is a real philosophy about being compassionate to all species in your lifestyle. And Thomas, this is what you did with your career, because the fashion industry, as you know, is one of the most polluting industries, and also a very violent one towards animals. And you really evolved as well, transcending your values with your career. And how did you do that?
Yeah, well, thanks for the introduction as well. Nice to be here. For me, it was like a trickle effect of, when you first sort of go vegetarian in your life and then eventually realize it's kind of not enough, and then you go vegan. And kind of went down into like the clothing that I wore, and just generally the way I like to live my life. And even then I was changing products that I was using at home to become more vegan and ethical. But I realized that my kit that I used at work wasn't. And I think it's just easy to get stuck in a rut when you're working on set, because you need stuff that actually works. And I think when I found that there was more and more product companies going vegan and they still actually worked and I could get the results I needed, that was when with my everyday work. And I found I sort of, resorted back to the sort of salon training of selling products. But instead of selling them for financial gain, it was more like showing the sort of numerous sort of models and actors and things I'd work with in a week and say, look, this product actually really works and it's completely cruelty free. And you sort of see people be like, oh, wow. Because if they can take something home that actually works for them and they feel good about it, then people are willing to make the change. So I sort of found then that my way of actually making an active change was kind of face-to-face contact, one-on-one. And when I realized that I could do that, that's when I really started to feel good about, using my job for good.
Yes, and also through your art. I mean, your creative work is very impressive. You're doing art with hair, and you produce amazing content and pictures in the fashion industry. And just the fact that you can create such an amazing artistic work, it's a reflection of also your values. And this is, your medium that is also pushing this message.
Oh, thank you. I think that's the thing. I think because, fashion is obviously culturally important, but sometimes if I'm creating a hairstyle, I can take a step back at it and see the sort of fun in it. And I think there's something to be said for sort of having fun and creating something artistic without hurting anybody. And I think that was what was really important to me.
Thank you so much. We'll come back to you in a minute. I'm going to introduce you right now to Emmanuelle Farra, which is a guest that I'm very excited to have today. Where is Emily? Oh, I think she has been disconnected. Let's see. Well, we'll jump to Aditi. Hey, Aditi, how are you? I cannot hear you.
Uh-oh.
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
Good. So Aditi is a dear friend of mine and a fellow activist. I really love her work. She's focused on social justice and sustainable fashion, and she's incredible. She also has a very specific visual creative mindset. She's a all over gorgeous person inside and out, and I would love her to explain really what she's doing.
Well, thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Aditi Meyer. I am a sustainable fashion blogger, workers' rights activist, and photojournalist. I had my start in this space. I had my start in this space about 7 years ago now. Rana Plaza factory collapse. And so for those that are not familiar, Rana Plaza was an 8-story garment factory in Bangladesh, producing for some of the world's and the day before this factory collapsed, they found structural cracks in the building, and it was ordered to evacuate. But there was so much pressure from upper management to have garment workers complete orders that they were forced to come back into work. And when you think about the demographic that often makes up garment workers, they don't often have the luxury to forgo a day's wage. And so, garment workers returned and the factory collapsed, killing over 1,100 people. And this is literally the biggest industrial disaster of our time. And for me, at that time, I have a background in photography. I was getting more into the fashion industry. And so I was really passionate about visuals, aesthetics, design. But when Rana Plaza happened, it really catalyzed a new understanding of the fashion industry, where all the hands that the supply chain touched was so clear to me. And it was also very clear to me the disproportionate impact that fashion had on women of color globally. So from there, I started a blog that was about sustainable fashion, which I didn't have much of a nuanced understanding of what sustainability was at that time. I wasn't even someone that was really into the environment, but throughout my last 5-6 years in this space, it's been a very organic process of learning more about the social impacts of fashion, but the environmental impacts, and more importantly, how they're all interconnected. I'm based in Los Angeles, and so a lot of my work today is actually organizing with garment workers in Los Angeles. When we think of the idea of sweatshops, I think it's often seen as a distant abstraction that happens in other countries, but it's happening on our own borders, and it's very much tied to other social justice issues and other marginalized communities, such as the undocumented community. When I talk about my mission, I often say I have the mission of decolonizing the fashion industry. I think when I think about colonial practice, it's very much about creating a system that's rooted in extraction, whether that's extraction of resources, of labor, and the exploitation of those resources as a means for infinite financial gain, but at someone's cost. And so with that mission, I continue to do my work as a workers' rights activist, as a writer and photojournalist, exploring themes of identity, labor, consumer culture, and the environment, all those types of stuff.
Thank you so much, Aditi. I think I managed to find Emily. Yes.
My power surged and everything went dark, and my Wi-Fi wasn't working for a minute. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, perfect. I hear you perfectly.
I guess in terms of introducing myself, I am a writer at Vogue and have been there about 5 years. And I have I think I started writing about sustainability back when I was actually at style.com, in like 2013. I graduated right after the Rana Plaza collapsed. And so I kind of entered the workforce thinking about, fashion's impact, and had always loved fashion, but never really, thought that I was going to enter the workforce and, address some of those issues, and had always just loved kind of the glamour and fun and everything. But now that I'm at Vogue, I've been covering this there for about 5 years, and I guess my personal mission is sort of rooted in, I think, trying to help people feel empowered to participate in this, and I think people do realize that now. And it is so much about like the small things you do, and I think that's coming to light more and more, especially during the coronavirus. A few years ago, people were kind of like, oh, well, it just seems like too big of a problem to fix. Fashion's environmental impact, the excess, the pace of everything, it just seemed so insurmountable. And slowly, things are changing, and I think the industry it maybe took a little bit too long to really wake up to what was happening, but right now is a really interesting time to be thinking about this because, you know, even just our ideas of what's fashionable and luxurious are totally changing. And it sort of like feels a bit, not like a reckoning, but, you know, things are not going to be the same. And you can't really get away with the way people were operating before.
Yes.
And I definitely got into this subject matter, like sort of as a guilty, you know, fast fashion shopper. You know, when I was in college, I didn't think about it and didn't have a huge budget to spend on things, but loved clothes and was in the Midwest and did not have that many options. And it was really you know, when it came to like what was happening in Rana Plaza, what was happening with clothes being dumped in landfills, the idea that polyester makes up most of those clothes and no one had really considered what it was made of. That was when I really started to care. And then, like we all have experienced, it really is like a ripple effect. Like everything is connected to this. Like cotton is detrimental to the earth. Like there's so many things that need to be changed. You know, it's not just synthetics, it's not just fast fashion. There's so many things.
Yes.
So lately at Vogue, we've been really trying to tell big stories about not just what people are doing, because I think the beginning it was really about awareness and kind of making things known to people. But I think now people do know and they're looking for solutions, and we're trying to figure out what those are and talk to the right people and give the right people a platform as well. Because I think we have a unique opportunity to shine a light on people.
Exactly. That's what I really admire about your work. And it's because I noticed you are really an avant-garde in the way you speak in the high fashion industry. You know, I noticed your work for a long time. That's why when you started to actually listen to Vegan Fashion Week and write about Vegan Fashion Week, I was very, you know, first very humbled, but also very excited that there was this kind of open minded people really willing to, you know, give a voice to emerging movements that are, you know, at the time when you started to write about Vegan Fashion Week, there was nothing going on regarding vegan fashion.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was such a new concept and also a story that is surrounded by so many cliches. You know, people, they think about veganism as something very extremist, you know, that cannot fit really in the creative world, that is, you know, maybe low quality. So I think what we are all creating today, all the people that are here today, is really elevating values and conscious creativity and create, you know, a change of vision and philosophy for the future. We really, I think all of us combined really help bring a new light to what it is to be conscious and creative and how we can really impact the world in a way that is genuine, because we are all doing this from the heart, you know, because we believe in it. This is not something we are creating out of greed or, you know, this is really, I believe, the future of our generation is to start to think about what are the simple steps and the simple ways for us to really grow as a community and really create a positive impact. So that's why I'm going to my second question right now. With all of you guys, I would like, you know, maybe to discuss, you know, ways to, you know, inspire this kind of change in community when you're an artist and a creative. How can you take these little steps to face the mainstream that is, you know, sometimes really violent? We all experience that. Myself with Vegan Fashion Week, Aditi with social justice, Nash with feminism, you know, Maggie also that has to also probably deal with a lot of mainstream cliches and things that she is trying to overcome with also her own values. So maybe you can help our audience today with some tips.
I would just chime in to say that, I think everything we do, that you start on a personal level, that you can try to set a precedent for that, So, for example, with Support and Feed, we're trying to influence the broader food market of feeding people in need so that all of the major organizations would start to also do what we're doing, which is providing vegan food. So we're doing it on a small level, but we have a greater goal of spreading that message to everyone so that everyone realizes that's kind of a requirement. And, I also try very hard to influence, Billie, my daughter, is a vegan as well, and so I'm in charge of sort of helping sort of manifest some of her goals, and so we try really hard to influence the touring world, her fashion world. She wears a lot of upcycled clothing. It's always something we talk about with brands all the time. What's your eco-friendly line? What are you doing about this? What's your fabric? Who's making it? It's always part of a conversation. So people come to us knowing that's going to be a big part of the conversation. As far as merch goes, we pay attention. We get something in a plastic bag. There's immediately a call. This has to end, selling merch at venues. No plastic has been a major part of what we've been doing, and having an environmental company with us called Reverb to educate all the fans, etc. We have all vegan catering. And I say all those things not because so much what we're doing, but then it establishes that can be done. So the first time, and we're at, Billie's not the first person to do all of these things. Obviously, we have trailblazers helping us know what we can ask for. But every time you say, okay, our tour has to be all vegan catering and, all of these things, that sets a precedent for the next one. So I think people can't underestimate what they do individually, and letting it be known. Don't hide your light under a barrel. Say what you want and why you want it, and then that people will start to go, oh, I didn't even know that was a thing. Now we'll offer it for other people.
Thank you so much, Maggie. And I think that's very interesting that you can really, use your platform to create values and help people. This is because you don't need to do it. You don't need to create this for additional exposure. So that's why I think it's very interesting today, is to show that all this mission we all carry is really genuine, and we really try to make something happen in our daily life as a individual, and that's very important. I want to point that we cannot wait for governments, we cannot wait for policies to change. It starts at home every day with what we eat, what we wear, what we put on our skin. We can already vote with our dollars every day, and we can also choose to back up our creativity with trying to support a nonprofit, trying to do some work for free to help other people, try to give advices, try to speak. To me, it's very difficult. Maybe you noticed, I'm not comfortable, but I try to fight this because I believe the message is more important than my comfort. And I think this is what people should do, is try to really today go further and try to see beyond social distancing. We need to really go deeper into this and not think that everything is going to get to normal. It's not. Normal doesn't exist anymore. Now we need to really take individual responsibility to change things. So that's what I wanted to say, and maybe someone else has something to add. Aditi?
I relate to what you're saying, Maggie, about when you receive the merch and then there's plastic, and then you go, oh, I didn't even think about that element of it. And I think one of the ways that we learn is through just experiencing the things we don't like, and realizing, oh, I don't like that. I don't want to do it like that. I want to do it like this. And so it's not about perfection or doing everything right the first time round. It's like you're going to come across things that you don't even think about until they're happening. And I think one of the things for me when I was really young and touring, I remember one night where I was in my bunk. I'd gone to bed because I was everyone was up. Everyone on the bus was kind of up and drinking and talking. It was kind of like a party atmosphere on the bus. And I went to bed because I was like, oh, I just don't want this. And I was in my bunk and I was like, this is my tour bus. And there's just like 12 men just drinking beer and talking loud to each other. And I'm like, oh, I need a break from it. And I was thinking, that's quite weird, really. Like not to have an ego about it. I was like, it is my tour and I should kind of be more comfortable on my own bus. And it just made me think about crew. And why is there no female crew? Like, I have an all-male band, I have an all-male crew, and no one here I could ask for a tampon, or I need like girl energy or something. And it was that, like, realizing, like, you see the plastic, or you just suddenly, I see myself in my bunk leaving the group of men because I need a break on my own bus. And I was like, okay, I need to change this. I want to have female crew. I want a female sound engineer. I want a female. It's majority women on the tour, because I also thought then it made me think, I want girls to come to my show and then think, I can do this. I could be an artist. I could be a musician, and not all of those girls are going to necessarily relate to me. They're there because they like my music, but they might not see themselves like in me on stage in some way. So I was like, it would be cool if there's like a group of women that are all different in some way, and there's diversity on stage, and someone who doesn't necessarily see like, oh, there's me and Kate. They'll be like, oh, there's me and Linda, and there's me and Alicia, or there's me and Emma, or like another female that just kind of represents them a little bit more. And I think, like, the more you do, the more it feels that you can do things. If that makes sense. And yeah, I think it's definitely just about learning, not being afraid to say your opinion, because with veganism or ethical messages, you can kind of feel, I think less so now, because I think a lot of young people are kind of like at the forefront of that, which is really inspiring and a relief, actually. But there are times sometimes when you're like, oh God, I don't want to be banging. I'm always sort of like the moral, like, grandma that brings everybody down, and it's like, you don't want to sort of take that role on. You want it to be so I try to always make the message like, this has actually made my life better, more enjoyable, and more fun for these reasons, and that's why I do it. Like, I get so much out of like doing these things, and I'll tell you why, to try and make people realize it can really be about lifting your life, rather than being like, I can't do this anymore and I can't do that. It's not about limitations. It's actually like, it's really expanded things for me. So
I think that's an important point. It's not always about missing out. It's about enriching your life. And I think I found a similar thing with, that, there can be a lot of people out there, vegans especially, that like to show the sort of like cruel, inhumane behind the scenes videos, which obviously are very important. But I've found that can often fall on deaf ears when people feel attacked to change. And I think that's when I found sort of using my message of like, mine does tend to be like a product-based kind of message, because that's the thing I work with on a daily basis. And when I tell people like, individually, this is something that you can do to enrich your life and still, essentially look good, then that's when people kind of listen. I found.
It's hard because the horrible stuff. I mean, I got tagged in something the other day, and it was just like, I just went on Twitter, and it was this horrible, it was like a pig's head, and I was just like, oh, I can't see this right now. And I have seen all that stuff, because I also remember a moment where I went, okay, I think I'm sort of like, I remember feeling like, I'm vegetarian, so it's fine, I don't have to look at it. And then sort of getting to the point where I was like, but I actually would like to be a bit more educated, and I think I've avoided this for so long because it makes me really uncomfortable. So I like forced myself to watch some stuff, which is horrible, but really happening. It's a bit like, the disaster that you're talking about. Like, we don't want to hear about that stuff. We don't want to hear 1,000 people died. It upsets us. It makes us feel terrible, but it's reality. And, I think that there's like a personal choice to go, I'm going to expose myself to this like stuff that's really upsetting. And then I'm going to, you've got to compartmentalize as well and go, I'm going to put that there. And then what am I going to do about it that makes me feel, how do I carry on feeling good about life? Like, how do I change my life so that I can feel positive about the world? And I think a lot of us are feeling like that now in quarantine, because it's like we're all affected in some way, everyone in very different ways, but none of us are living normally. And all of us are like feeling anxiety and fear and worried about our vulnerable people. And, you know, like there's different levels of stress that it's causing for people, but there is stress for everyone. So it's like, all right, how do I survive this in my world? How do I make it okay for me mentally? And like, what can I do to be useful? And so it's a good time to get a message out like this, because I think people are really going to be wanting to be useful and wanting to help in some way.
Yeah. I also think it's important. I mean, this is the moment, you know, if this isn't the moment, I don't know what the moment is, because, you know, we're in the throes of this climate crisis. It's not in the future. It's right now. I mean, in LA, we're preparing for fire season. We don't even just have fire season anymore. We have a year of fires, you know, and we're preparing for that on top of our quarantine. So trying to get people to understand that the climate crisis is right now. We don't have time to wait. We have to make these major steps right now. And I think this is the perfect time to do it, because we can change our eating. That's all on us. That's something we can do really just by ourselves. I think for me, I'm quite interested in learning more about the fashion, because I think probably like me, I mean, this shirt is made out of plastic bottles, you know, and I get clothes from thrift stores and vintage stores, but I'm interested to know, what do you think people can do coming out of this to change the way they dress? Because it's not as obvious. You know, you don't go to a store and have a vegan section of fashion, you know. Do you have more suggestions other than thrifting? Because we do want the fashion industry to survive as well, but how do we help that fashion industry survive in a healthy, environmentally non-cruel way?
Just to jump in here, I think this ideas that are being communicated. One thing that comes clear is our respective art forms are so important at this point in time, whether that's music, beauty, the fashion industry. I often say, for me, fashion is just a medium for me to engage with these larger systems of oppression, because I think fashion being such a visual medium, it's a really accessible gateway for people to engage with these conversations that could be a lot more nuanced, like labor rights or regenerative agriculture, localized food systems. Like, it's also connected, but I think for someone entering this movement, they're going to need that accessible touch point. And that's what all of these mediums end up doing. And then going back to COVID, I think if there's one thing COVID has showed us, is that these systems are not sustainable. Business as usual is not sustainable. Like fashion industry specifically, right? We've seen that violence is the norm in the fashion industry. The fact that ethical or sustainable fashion is a complete niche. The fact that human rights, animal rights, whatever lens you want to look at it through, is seen as a differentiator, speaks to a larger truth of what is considered the norm. In terms of what we can do in the fashion world going forward, COVID has exposed the soul of sustainability, which is asking, what do I really need? We are all reduced to our bare necessities. So even I think our relationship with consumption as a consumer body has been very much challenged. Major brands are reorienting their relationship with how often they need to produce, the fashion timeline, fashion weeks, all of that. Huge brands with like huge bottom lines are canceling orders, and that's leaving, you know, marginalized garment workers at more risk. With these corporate entities are not really going to be affected. So I think now is also the time to really hone into a culture of accountability, consumers really voicing what their concerns are. And I think social media, the vegan fashion weeks of the world are huge forums to do that, because it sets a precedent of what consumers are looking to recreate the new norm. But in terms of fashion and where we go from here, consuming less, brands producing less, I think we need to really grapple with this idea of degrowth as an industry, because the rate at which stuff is being produced now, it could be made out of the most recycled materials, you know, organic materials, but it's just not sustainable at the scale that it's being produced. And I think scale is a topic that the industry does not explore enough. So that's my 2 cents.
I really relate to what you're saying about the consumer, like as an individual. I feel like being forced to just be with yourself and have the time to suddenly, you know, there's like our to-do list in life, which is like the daily to-do list, the stuff that's right in front of you, and then the stuff that's like always in the back of the filing cabinet of like, one day I'm going to do this, and one day I'm going to do that, one day I'm going to think about that. And it's like there's suddenly time for all of that stuff, and it's like, oh God, like what have I been doing that I've been wanting to deal with for a while that I haven't stopped or edited or changed, you know, personally about myself. And I've definitely been addressing that. And then there's things like in the first couple of weeks we had like our comedy quarantine argument that we had in the first 2 weeks was about rice.
Brown rice.
It was about brown rice. It was like a big argument because we like left out some rice that didn't get eaten, and we didn't store it properly afterwards. And we were like, oh my God, like we've wasted rice. Oh shit. And it was like this huge drama between us because there's like so much awareness of like what's in the fridge, what's going to go moldy. Oh my God, I dropped a bit of pasta down the sink. Like, you know, all the stuff that you're normally so casual about. Oh, I can eat what do I feel like eating tonight? And although we're still so privileged and able to really get things that we want, but you are being a bit more like, all right, what should we have? What's in the fridge? What's in the freezer? What's left? What's going to go moldy? We don't want to waste anything. And there's like a hyper awareness of like wanting to be, to use things in a different way. And we keep talking about, and Tom's actually started growing a vegetable garden as well. And it's like, we're like, what do we want to take with us when stuff doesn't go back to normal? Because as you say, we can't go back to normal because that's why we're here. But when the world starts moving again, like how can we bring this message and the stillness and the lessons that we've learned, like, and not forget them and keep using them and keep going that way? Because as we know, it's so easy to get back into habits. Like humans are so habitual, and it's like I feel really aware. I'm like, I don't want things to go back to normal. I don't want to forget what I'm learning, and I'm like nervous about that. Kind of.
It makes me wonder if we will forget it though, because it's the only comparison I'll make with this, but it really reminds me of like my grandmother growing up, where it would be like everything was mended and food-wise, like nothing was wasted, and that was definitely a post-war mentality. And I think that's, like I say, that's where the comparison really ends. But it's just that I don't think it will forget it, or at least I hope we won't individually, because my grandmother certainly did.
We won't, because we experienced it. Yeah. But like, what's for future generations?
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's like we've been so lucky in our lives that like in this part of the world, like most people I know haven't experienced like, well, even if there's like war happening, unless you're a soldier going to war or you're in a war-torn country, a lot of us in the Western world have just no idea what that's really like. It's like, oh, we're at war, cool, well, I'm just going to go to Topshop, and then I've got work, and then at the weekend I'm going to meet up with my friends. Like being at war, or the things that we see on news, like in the Western world, feel so far away. And I feel like this is the first time a global event has like restricted our lives and made us feel anxious every day and kind of scared about this like thing that's out of our control. And so I don't know where I was going with that really, but yeah, it's a life-changing feeling and experience, I think, for so many of us.
Emily, you wanted to add something?
I guess what I would add is sort of going back to what people can do in terms of fashion and what they're buying and wearing. I totally agree. It's about like the excess is really the big problem. And, you know, there's too much clothing. It's getting burned. It's not, you know, the problem now is that so many designers created collections that got returned. They have nowhere to sell it. Or some of these retailers that are really struggling, like major stores, are putting things on deep discount. And it's sort of like, I mean, I am in Southwest Florida, which is why the power surge, because it's a crazy storm here. I got here kind of right near the beginning of this for a long weekend, and then did not go back to New York. It was not really planned. So I have like 2 items of clothing here. So all of these sales are happening, and I'm like, oh my God, like I would love to get this 70% off. I've been wearing my mom's clothes, but I'm like, you know, really not a big shopper, honestly, and do a lot of vintage and shop on the Real all the time. But it's very tempting now that all these brands are on sale. And on one hand, you know, there's the designers you want to support. Like I have friends who do have conscious collections, and they work with artisans and you feel you want to support them. But the fact that, apparel spending is so down, and it is showing that people in a crisis aren't thinking about clothes. We're not going anywhere. So on one hand, why would you buy a new dress? I'm someone who's always loved self-expression and clothing and fashion and like the stories of fashion. It's not just about stuff, but, people had to reshuffle their priorities. They might have reduced income. And I think, the conversations about sustainability, and changing the industry, people always said, the consumer has to demand it. And that's sort of what's happening because they're not shopping. Like they don't want this stuff. And I think companies are really panicking and kind of realizing that they, for years they could have changed and just didn't really have to. And I think now, we don't know what's going to happen at Fashion Week. A lot of designers are like kind of banding together to propose a total shift in the way retail operates because it's really hard on designers. That really is like kind of a trickle down problem with the way collections are shipped. You see coats in stores in July and then no one's buying a coat in July. And it just kind of fuels the problem of too much stuff that people don't want. And then it's on sale or it has to get destroyed. So it's a huge problem, but this is the time that they're going to fix it. And I think for a consumer, before the pandemic, I feel like what I heard from a lot of people was that it was too expensive to shop sustainable, or it was sort of like almost too much work in a way to like try to do the right thing. And it's so easy to shop from certain retailers where you click like 3 buttons and it's yours. And it just was like an added thing to do. And everyone's busy, but when all of this started happening and we were told to stay home and to work remotely and, we thought it was for 2 weeks. Now it's been 9 weeks for me. At the beginning, I sort of realized that like this was sort of holding a mirror to what people can do to help fight climate change because it is like individual actions. And that was sort of, I guess, another argument people always make was like, oh, well, what is my action really going to do when it's this huge problem with plastic or, I can't really make a difference by myself. But, we all had to stay home. We all had to, limit our exposure to people. We had to do all of these new measures and all of that adds up to a whole. And that is how we're trying to fix this. And that's the same thing with, changing how much, maybe being vegan or just reducing how much meat you're eating, not using plastic bags, not having a plastic bottle. And so I feel like those conversations really resonated when I started having them with people. And it really is like those small changes you make, like doing a little bit extra work to look for a brand that does hold itself to certain standards. For me now, like what I'm super interested in is vegan fashion because that is still something that's kind of hard to find. And the connections with the meat industry and leather, it's like so horrible. But yeah, I think that's an important thing for people to realize that,
Yes.
You stayed home, you did your part, and now like you can do your part in other ways.
Yes, I think that the next level conversation in the fashion industry today, after, of course, sustainability, that we have been experienced for several years now, and Aditi can, speak about that because she's very knowledgeable in this world of sustainable fashion, has been greenwashing a lot, and I think the next level conversation we really must have is how do we sync sustainability with ethics? How do we stop being hypocritical in our lifestyle? How do we become intersectional in our values? How do we see the big picture? It's not just about buying a sustainable jacket that is $500, but is that jacket made ethically? Is it protecting the workers? Is it made animal free? Are we protecting the environment? It's all these questions. It's not just about, it is sustainable, but what is sustainable? Today we really need to go deeper and try to look at tags, understand what it means, try to avoid animal products that are really what is damaging the planet today at a level that is unbelievable, from the deforestation, the water consumption, other than just the cruelty to animals that sadly, not everybody cares about animals. But if you are an environmentalist, you have to care about the animal. If you are a feminist, you have to ask yourself questions, why should I exploit another female for a milk or a lever? This is philosophical questions that we really need to go through ourselves on a personal level, trying to really connect A to B and try to go deeper in our truth, because we don't have a choice anymore. Aditi, do you have something to say about that? Because I know you're very knowledgeable on that, in that area, especially in social justice, that you really push forward.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to touch on. I feel like, for one, a big conversation that often exists with sustainable fashion is the price point and accessibility, which I think is important to talk about. So I think we also have to, as someone mentioned, like, we're looking at like what we already have, whether that's rice or what's already in your closet. This idea of using the resources at your disposal, the idea of what you own being the most sustainable thing you already own. Like, you don't need to go out and consume more. So I think there's that element of it. When it comes to really building an intersectional movement between ideals of veganism and sustainability, I think we need to be having more raw conversations there as well, because often the vegan alternatives is often made of synthetics and things like that, which we know is not good for the environment. I know, like, for alternative to leather is often PVC, which has a lot of health implications for workers in factories. So it's also merging that bridge between environmental sustainability and veganism, and having more materials innovations, like Piñatex, right? The idea that what was once a waste element of pineapple is a new whole source of income for farmers, is a whole new innovative material. That there's a lot of innovation that could be happening there. So I think we need a lot of different things happening. For one, there's a whole shift in consumer culture that I've already talked about. Again, consuming less, but consuming consciously when you do. For brands and corporations, I think it's really understanding that sustainability at its core is not just about using an organic material, but sustainability is about farmer workers' rights. For some, it's animal rights. So, like, really having an intersectional approach there. And then I also think we need to be talking about government and policy, because it's not unbeknown to me that individual action is extremely important, but 100 companies are contributing to 70% of global emissions. We need to talk about that too. So I think systems level thinking is huge. And we have to look at who are the big actors and how can we bring everyone at the table, because one individual action, yes, we can argue that's not going to do enough. We need a coordinated effort, but we also need to talk about the corporations that are often not a part of this conversation, but are having disproportionate effects on the environment. I could go on and on about that, but I'll leave it at that.
Yes, so that's very important topics, and it all comes to this about personal responsibility and how we need to really think through during this pandemic to come up, stronger with ideas and ways to transcend, our values with our creativity, which is really the topic today. It's to help all these creatives out there that really want to move forward with some kind of positive activism that, of course, all activist platforms are important, but they speak to very different people, we need to all try to use what we know best to translate our message, our positive message for the world today. That's really the message. So it's been an hour, guys, already. I cannot believe that. So I just wanted to thank you all so much for your time. I'm very grateful that you really took, this opportunity to discuss this with our audience, and that makes a lot of, I'm sure, very interesting answers for our viewers. Thank you so much. If you have something to ask, please feel free to comment on the YouTube section. I'm going to personally reply. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time right now to go through all the questions, but I'll take time to reply. You can follow Vegan Fashion Week, you can follow Support and Feed, you can follow Kate Nash, Thomas, Emily, and Aditi. I'm going to link all the Instagram accounts under the video. Thank you so much, everybody. That was very, very interesting, and I hope we can discuss more interesting topics in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.